Hey, what is up?
There he
Hello, hello,
is.
hello, hello. Here we are. We are live. Didn't even realize you were ready to go, but that's just the chaos of the day that is Selection Sunday. Thank you for jumping on, my friend, Mr. Matt Russell. We are here on the DRF Sports Pod live to break down the brackets because it's finally here. As mentioned, this
Yeah.
is the DRS Sports Podcast, episode 55. Make sure you like and follow wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander. The brackets are set, and I can't believe it. I'm so excited for this time of year because at this point, hey, everyone's bracket is clean. Everyone's bracket looks good. All your bets are solid. All your bets are feeling good. And here we are. Now it's time to find the value. So I thank you for joining us on this very special edition of the DRF Sports Podcast, pardon me. And even though the bracket is only an hour, a little over an hour old, we've already got the best betting angles, talking points, and hidden value to help everyone, hopefully, try to win some money. That's the goal here, right? For the record, just so people know, DRF Sports Podcast, we got you covered on drf.com/sports. You don't need to go anywhere else to get your sports betting information this March. You got this podcast here. We'll be breaking everything down. Plus, we got our guys, Jack Fitzpatrick and Bennett Conlon, who will be on doing their DRF college sports podcast as well, twice a week. Needless to say, nowhere else you need to be. But first and foremost, my guy, Mr. Matt Russell, here joining me. And I know your head must already be spinning because you're just crunching all the numbers, filling out the spreadsheets, finding everything that we need to know right now because I'm about to hit you with a bunch of questions and you better have answers right away. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm happy
Yeah,
with
man.
it anyways. How you
It's
doing, man? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I am reeling. You're right. I am totally reeling. Yeah, it's like being handed the test on the first day of school, right?
Yeah.
You're like, well, we haven't had time to study. I'm literally cramming the numbers in because normally we get our numbers and it's like depending on the sport or whatever, we get to pump them in there. And you get sort of time, maybe have a cup of coffee, something along those lines. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm literally doing it as it's happening because it's stuff at 7, 8, 9 o'clock. Like we're all just rocking and rolling here. And so luckily we need 3 days. We're going to get 3 days to sort of digest this bracket. And we'll obviously be able to talk about this later on in the week. But that's no shortage of takes. I'm already fired up, man. Like I'm looking at this bracket and I'm like, I don't have that many sort of spicy, like slam your fist on the table. I can't believe Texas A&M didn't get in, but like I'm not going to go to war on that necessarily. I'm just going to be kind of bummed out because I like my guy Buzz, right? And
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
like I couldn't believe that you're dragging Rutgers in.
Yeah.
Your guy, one of your favorites over there, Ron Harper Jr. I don't know if you made a
Yes.
call or something to get him in. And then by the way, like who doesn't apparently care for March Madness or Selection Sunday? Tom Brady apparently doesn't
Yeah.
care that much about this. So if Tom
Well,
Brady doesn't care, makes me think maybe I don't care as much. But I'm here to tell you, Tom Brady, that this is a way more important day for college basketball than it is for you and your whims on whether or not you want to actually play football this season. So I'm fired up, man. Let's get into it.
yeah.
I'm old school, so I literally have pen and paper bracket. Like I'm
I
writing it
like
all
it.
down.
I
Obviously
like it.
have the computers and the multiple screens and the odds up. I'm really impressed with the industry here. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess I shouldn't be that surprised. We have lines up at this point.
We do. We
So
definitely do.
like
And
I thought we'd be just going like, okay, well the Indiana Wyoming line just popped up and something along those lines, right? But we actually have them here. So this is gonna be fun, man. We can compare my line to the actual opener here and sort of have a conversation about some of these teams and some of these games.
yeah, this is going to be super fun. And a lot of people that have been along with us, me and you, on this ride of just talking ball for the past couple of years, we know we come at this from different angles, right? Like I have very cliched ways that I look at March Madness and lose at March Madness, but enjoy the fun of betting on March Madness. Like I like star power. So, we'll get to your boy Chet for sure, because I know Chet will be an interesting conversation for the next month for sure.
Yeah.
But Peter Kiss, I'm looking forward to. Like, there's a lot going on that I am looking forward to break down on this pod with you. And, I know you're going to come with the numbers. You're going to tell me certain things. I'm going to be just hating on Gonzaga, hating on Duke, just because that's what I do this time of year. So I'm fired up. There's a lot of places that we could start. I don't know where you particularly want to start, but let's just go region by region and kind of just talk about the different games. Does that work for you? Or do you want to, or I guess the other thing we could do is, these play-in games. Do we want to talk about those Tuesday and Wednesday? Do you want to get those out of the way?
We can hit them. We can hit them as we go through the brackets here. I want to talk about this Gonzaga team. I mean, we've talked about Gonzaga as sort of from a a conceptual standpoint, right? But I'm here to tell you right away, man. I've already got a bet here, anti-Gonzaga, right off the bat.
Whoa. Now, okay.
But let's sort of tone it for a second here. This is actually just a point spread bet in the first round. They opened 25-point favorites. That's just inherently a wrong number. My numbers have 19.5 as the right number. Now, listen, Gonzaga could go ahead and win this game by 40. That's exactly the type of thing that Gonzaga would do. I'm just saying it's the same thing we see every week, right? Gonzaga's 3 points higher than they should be against San Francisco, against St. Mary's, right? And sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. But 25 points on open was just way too high, and the market has made that adjustment, moving it down to 24 here. So somebody out there is right along with me when it comes to
this. Look at this. Shouts to our guy Jack. We got the line alert at the bottom there. Minus 24.5. Look at this. We got graphics. We got a live stream going. We're doing it big here on the DRF Sports Podcast. I like it. I like the energy we're coming with early here. And I'm with you. Gonzaga, I get it, but doesn't it seem kind of funny after however many years we've been watching college ball, but doesn't it seem funny that it's like Gonzaga being so overvalued after all of those years for the majority of my life watching college basketball and being like, oh, Gonzaga's not getting the respect that they deserve. They should be a number 1 seed or they should be a higher seed. They keep getting no respect in the tournament. And now we're talking about how they're being favored by way too many points in the first round. Like, it is kind of funny to see where college ball has come. But in terms of that line, that's way too many points. I mean, if you're forcing me to make bets and I'm the one that's here that's going to give out bets and I'll look dumb, I'm totally okay with that. I understand my role here. That's too many points. Way too many points. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, and that, again, they're going to win this game, so, we can talk, again, and we will get to, again, this is a conversation. The Gonzaga conversation is, I think, one that we're going to be able to have after this weekend, right? I think Sweet 16 is the sort of bare minimum here, though a potential Memphis matchup is actually somewhat interesting in the second round, if that even happens, which...
Well, let's keep this moving here. Boise State and Memphis as we continue in this West Regional here. We look at the line here, and we have Memphis favored by 1.5. Now, I look at that line, and, I mean, that's basically a pick 'em, right? Very close game. Penny Hardaway in Memphis. I know there's been a lot of talk with that program and just what's been going on, but I'm going to be honest here. I kind of like Boise. Right. And I'm looking forward to the Boise matchup here that we could see in a potential in the second round, as their coach now was a former assistant at Gonzaga. I just think that'd be a cool storyline. We know that the committee likes to set things up like that, to have built-in storylines already into the tournament to sell the tournament. So, I mean, I think there's just too much been going on with Penny Hardaway and his program right now, but I like Boise in the pick'em. And if you're going to give me an extra 1.5, sure, I'll take the 1.5 protection. Sure, why not?
It's funny because you mentioned, right, the Gonzaga story of men of a certain age, right, who loved Gonzaga as that 12, 13 seed, way back in our sort of formative years, if you will, right? And how that's the great part about basketball and college basketball, and that we don't get that in football, right? That's never going to happen. But the team in football that is sort of the Gonzaga team is Boise State, right? So a bit of a sort of a thing there, if you will. That being said, as for this game, I have this line at dead pick'em. And the one thing I will say about the committee this year is, a lot of times you get these 8-9 games, and there's some other ones in the 7-10, 6-11, even beyond that will blow your hair back as far as, what the lines are for some of these games. The
Yep.
8-9 games are like, it's like they pulled out Ken Pong and were like, what are two teams that are right next to each other that we can have as dead even? Because basically all of these 8-9 games are that. And so what you're seeing though now is if you like Boise State, wait, man, like, because we're already seeing it move, because this thing opened at like Pick'em and spent like 4 seconds there before going up to -1. I've even seen some twos starting to pop here on Memphis. I imagine it's probably not going to stop, right? Like, people like Memphis, Penny Hardaway, like, tell me anything you know about Boise State, right? Like, nobody knows anything about Boise State. You know, and obviously a dramatic win yesterday against San Diego State in the Mountain West Conference, and they were the 1 seed regular season champion in that league. This team is no joke, but they don't do it in a flashy way, whereas like Memphis could be accused of being all flash in a lot of ways, right? And yeah, they're playing a lot better basketball, but they're getting a lot of credit for 2 wins against Houston. Now, the Houston question we'll get to a little bit later on, a top 5 metric team who is the 5th seed in their region right now. That's a whole other situation. But depending on how you feel about Houston, right, like, then maybe Memphis isn't all that exciting. And they got trucked pretty hard today in the American Championship. And so I see Memphis as being this flashy team that a lot of people are going to kind of pile their way into here from a betting standpoint. This one could go to 2, 2.5, 3, at which point you're betting on Boise in a pick'em game, and what should be a pick'em line, you're getting 2 to 3 points. That's absolutely where I think I want to be. Now, again, we have time, and the good news is we can make these decisions later on. But if it's Boise for you, yeah, man, like, I would wait on this because I think we're going even higher than that.
So let's keep things moving here, and we'll go to, I mean, maybe the most famous upset picks people are trying to make each and every year is that 5-12 matchup, and it's Yukon at New Mexico State. And I mean, you look at this line here, you're talking Yukon -7. I mean, Yukon has been a very interesting team this year, as always. But again, do you feel like these are one of the things where the committee kind of knows everyone's hunting these 5-12 matchups? So every time we see one of those, it's going to be the radar going off, and it's like, ooh, 7. I mean, spread wise, I like the 7 points, but does New Mexico State have a chance here to make the outright win?
This is interesting, right? And so New Mexico State won their conference comfortably this year. They won it on Saturday comfortably without their best player really doing anything. So immediately you go, okay, like, they can have their best player not participate and still be okay. But that's against teams in the WAC, right? Yukon isn't the WAC. My numbers make this 6. It's 7. So like, on the surface, you go, okay, I'm going to take the +7. Problem is, 1, it's Yukon, right? So like, you know, they're going to give their best in the tournament. They just kind of always do. And maybe like last year's failure, you know, everybody was on Yukon last year, and then they go and they lose in the first round of the tournament. Maybe that might sour some people in this situation. New Mexico State is a regular in the tournament, going back to the days of Pascal Siakam. And so like, I think this line might come down because the numbers usually come, you know, towards my number, because I'm not making these numbers, right? These are market numbers, right? These are based on point spreads throughout the season and how point spreads are made. So I can see this number coming down when people get a little bit excited about New Mexico State, a team that when Auburn went to the Final Four that year, they got lucky to beat New Mexico State in the first round. Now, again, different players, all of that sort of thing, right? But when we're talking about programs here, in college basketball, it's all about programs. I get why New Mexico State is going to be a team that people are interested in. I think this might kind of go down. And if it gets closer to my number of 6, based on the size of Yukon, which is not something that New Mexico State has ever had to deal with. That team with Auburn, like, it had size because it's an SEC team, but it didn't have like epic size, right? That team was super athletic, and that New Mexico State team could kind of hang with that team athletically because they didn't have, you know, they didn't have Walker Kessler, for example, a player on Auburn right now, 7 feet tall. They didn't have that. And so Auburn ends up going to the Final Four because they were a super talented team. They didn't have size. But when you talk about guys like Sonogo, and like, honestly, the guards are all pretty big too for Yukon. Like, New Mexico State's going to get off that bus and be like, man, we have not dealt with this all year long. And that could be problematic here. And a Yukon team that can score the ball pretty well for a team that sort of in our minds, we think of Yukon, we go, it's kind of like one guy scoring and everybody else kind of defending. There's more guys who can score on Yukon here. And so if New Mexico State, the good thing about that win is they won that game without their best player playing much.
Yeah.
Bad news is like, if he's capable of being in foul trouble, if that happens again,
not good.
Bad news Bears, man. They're going to be good
Horrible.
at all. So I'm going to take away and see
foul trouble is always a thing. Foul trouble, sorry to interrupt, but foul trouble is always a thing that completely disrupts a college basketball game, especially in the tournament. It's one way that you can be watching a game very early on and you're on that side, and then all of a sudden the best player's in foul trouble and you just know this is a wrap, right? You just know right away. Definitely.
And if he's capable of getting in foul trouble in a championship game, like he's capable of, Yukon's capable of getting him in foul trouble. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to the 4 seed versus the 13. You got Arkansas against Vermont. That spread is at 5.5. And I look at that game and I think two things. One, Arkansas has won 14 of their last 17 games. But if you go back to last tournament, Arkansas got a scare from Colgate last year. So when I look at Vermont, and this game's being played in Buffalo, is this a bad draw for Arkansas here? Like, I like the 5.5 points, definitely, but the game is in Buffalo. This is not a good look for Arkansas. Or am I just reading too much into this?
It's interesting. Yeah, it is probably a bad draw. There's a decent chance Arkansas is sort of bad draw proof. And like, it's funny, like you mentioned, they got a scare from Colgate last year because they were down like double digits in the first half to Colgate. But like they ended up covering, and it was like 8.5, right? Like they ended up blowing out Colgate, right? It's like everything's sort of relative. If you ask somebody who bet Colgate in that game, you'd be like, oh man, we had them. They were up 10. We were getting 8.5, 9 points. Like, I can't believe that happened. If you ask somebody who bet Arkansas in that game, they're like, man, Arkansas is so good that they were able to win that game by 20 points after getting down by that number, right? And so like there's sort of a clash there. Vermont, again, these really, like, there's bad conferences and then there's really bad conferences. This year, that was a really bad conference in the America East, right? Like really bad. At the end of the day, right, it's just going to come down to like if they can hit their outside shots, because they're not going to be able to do anything, within the structure of the, offense inside on Arkansas. Arkansas isn't the biggest team necessarily, but they aren't the biggest team because their best players aren't the biggest players on their team. So like if they wanted to, there's some guys on Arkansas's bench that they could put in here that would be something that Vermont has like never seen before. But this isn't unlike New Mexico State, where it's like, regular to the tournament. There's a couple other here on this list. That's what makes this fun, right? Sometimes they pull off upsets. Sometimes they don't come remotely close to it. And that's the stuff we're going to have to figure out here. My numbers here from a metric standpoint make this a 3.5 point spread. So I do see some value on Vermont here as the number's up to 5.5 right now. But if you look at the matchup, and I had this conversation last week, right, where I'm going to bet 500 plus games in the regular season, because I know that I can go 53.5 to 54% over 500 games, and I'm going to accumulate my end profit that way, because I can't be 57% in a shorter period of time. Problem is, Shell, this is the tournament, man. This is all there is. There is 67 games. I'm probably not going to have a bet on every single one of them necessarily, though maybe I will, at least to some degree, just for the fun of it. But like, in order to have like this crazy profitable tournament, like you have to go 57, 58, 59. Like that's going to be more based on luck than anything else. So the point of that is like I have to, instead of just taking my half point, my point of value, my 1.5 of value that I would throughout the regular season, and then hope it sort of accumulates to a 54-46 win percentage, I have to look at some of these games deeper from a matchup standpoint, if I am going to try to hit 56 or 57% over the course of, say, a small sample size of 40 to 50 games. And so that's where some of these matchups come up where you go, man, like, especially this year, like there's so many good 4 and 5s that are like, man, that team could make the Final Four. But as soon as you are a 4 and 5, that means you are going against a 12 or 13 in the first round. And some of these 12 and 13s are pretty darn good, pretty darn scrappy, are well coached, can create open shots for themselves, and can hit those open shots once they're created. And so like this one's going to be a toss-up. We'll talk more about this later on this week. I'm not dying to traipse over anybody, grab Vermont plus 5.5. I think that's maybe the side I would look to be honest, but I would have to sort of look a little bit deeper into like what the logistics are as far as Vermont actually being competitive in this game, because Arkansas is a really good team that if you, not like it would be a first round game or whatever, but like just look at this bracket, like an Arkansas Gonzaga game would be incredibly interesting.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely. I look forward to that for sure. That would be cool. And you know me, I'm looking for my first opportunity to fade Gonzaga. The first time they're going to get someone decent, you know me, that's what I'm waiting for. So, hey, you could talk me into that for sure as the week plays along. But if we move on here, we got Alabama sitting there in the 6th seed, and they're waiting on a play-in. The first 4 game, you got Rutgers and Notre Dame. And as you look at that point spread, that game is on Wednesday. You got Rutgers favored by 1.5. Who do you got in this game? Because the first 4 games I always find super interesting because I love it because it's a preview into like it's just a nice little tease for the tournament. But we also know that every year it seems that one of these teams end up making a run in the tournament. So I ask you, as we discuss the first one here, do you see one of those teams being Notre Dame or Rutgers?
Yeah, I'm going to say no, because that's sort of the easy answer, right? Because that's the answer that you're going to be right more often than not. Because you got to get this game right first before you sort of go beyond that. I think in this game, I'm going to be on Notre Dame. This is a Mike Bray bet for me, right? There's sort of a saying in the in Notre Dame's head coach, in the industry, sort of Bray with prep, right? If Mike Bray gets prep, like you are going to have a problem on your hands here, right? And this is a Rutgers team. We mentioned the Ron Harper Jr. shot to beat Indiana a couple of weeks ago. This is a Rutgers team that didn't play anybody out of conference, and when they played actual human beings, and I literally mean human beings. I don't mean like good teams. I'm talking about Lafayette. Right? They lost to Lafayette this season, right? And like them against Iowa this past weekend, one of the easiest bets that I've made all year was Iowa to win the Big Ten championship. Not because I thought they would, were positive to beat Purdue today. That was kind of a bonus. But because I looked at their route and I'm like, they're going to get by the first team that they play. And they are the 5 seed, the 4 seed in their sort of pocket is Rutgers, and Rutgers away from home on a neutral is not going to put up any fight, and they're going to find themselves in the semifinal. Now, I was relatively fortunate in that Indiana knocked off Illinois, so I had sort of the best matchup possible in that case. Yeah. But it was more a fade of Rutgers than anything. Now I end up cashing Iowa plus 400 because they make the final, and you just sort of let that ride, and that's great. Like, that's how betting works, man. Like, sometimes you just fade a team. We've talked about it in other cases. Sometimes you're betting on somebody here to fade another team there. And so this is a combination of just not having that much regard for Rutgers and having a ton of respect for Notre Dame and Mike Bray. Now, they lost in the not in the ACC championship, but the ACC tournament. They've had plenty of time to prepare. I'm looking at the schedule here. It looks like that's a Wednesday game. They are getting the extra day here. And so this is, for me, going to be a Notre Dame for me. I have them favored in this game. I'm seeing the score right now that Rutgers is a -1 point favorite here. I've been sort of scamming through bunch of different books, and some of them, if I can't get a game because this is a New Jersey team, for example, and I'm looking and trying to find a bunch of different books here to compare this to, and I don't understand why Rutgers favored in this game. This is Notre Dame for sure. I'll be on the Notre Dame money line here. Anything with a plus in front of it is good when it comes to Notre Dame.
Okay, so we'll worry about Notre Dame versus Alabama when Notre Dame, after we discuss, post Notre Dame winning, we can look at that going forward. But again, you mentioned them having the extra day. You're talking about a coach that likes to prep. That also could be a little bit of added value. And we like to find those little extra things that might give us an edge, right? So let's keep it moving though. 3 seed, Texas Tech, going against Montana State, who are making their first tournament appearance since 1996. Wow. Remember 1996? Is that a thing that
vaguely
kind of go
sadly
about there?
more than I'd like to admit?
Who was no? I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm being stupid here. But as we look into that game, right, and that spread 15.5, Texas Tech. Do you like their chances there to cover 15.5 points? Is Texas Tech one of those teams that you're looking for that's going to be here making a statement? Because I know there's a lot of talk about maybe Texas Tech being able to make a bit of a run here. Maybe they're, as we get to Duke later on in, minutes away about talking about Duke. But there's a lot of talk about Texas Tech being a team that might be able to make a bit of a run here. Is there an older team, a bit physical team? What do you like or dislike about Texas Tech?
Yeah, this is so here. We can just fast forward right now to me being aggravated. If you want to just do that, we can just hit fast forward to me being aggravated. Texas Tech's going to play Duke in the, what would it be? The Sweet 16. Gonzaga is going to be sitting there waiting in the regional final. The entire NCAA business world is going to be wanting Duke and Gonzaga, right, in that regional final. The potential passing of the torch from Coach K to Mark Few, who's a guy I really like. And they're going to face Texas Tech, and Texas Tech's going to try to grime this game out with Duke. And it's going to be aggravating because Duke's going to get every call, and they're going to get shoehorned into the Elite Eight. Already upset about it, right? And unfortunately, Texas Tech's almost too good because they're not going to be 4, 5, whatever point underdogs where we can still bet Texas Tech, have them lose the game but still cover. You know what I mean? And just be like, well, at least I cashed, but I will probably have had Texas Tech money line as well. I'm already angry about the whole thing. So it's two separate questions. One, great, Duke is in your way in the Sweet 16. That's not ideal. And this is a Texas Tech team. I had plus 900 to win the conference from back in January, and they were picking minus, they're 2-point underdogs to Kansas. So I let that ride yesterday. So I'm still a little bitter with Texas Tech right now, but it doesn't change that I respect that team. Now, as you're talking at this game individually here, I kind of like Montana State plus the points here. This is again. These teams in these small conferences are not all created equal. Certainly within the conference, they're not created equal, as in, comparing two conferences together. But some of these teams are 5 seeds, 4 seeds that have won their tournament and got into the conference, into the tournament that way. Montana State was the best team in their conference, and they can play. Are they going to beat Texas Tech? No, but at the point spread that we have here, my numbers make it 13, right? Yeah. You see here 15.5, right? I'm going to take plus 15.5 with Montana State. I might even just wait to see if we get an extra point here or there over the next few days. But Montana State is going to be one that I've circled because Texas Tech just played, a pretty raucous Big 12 tournament against Kansas. Could have a little bit of a sleepwalky type situation here. Montana State was expected to win that tournament. They did so comfortably. This wasn't hey, we made the tournament on a last second shot type of a situation for Montana State. So I'll be on Montana State here plus the points. It's just a matter of how many points we're going to be able to get here with the Bobcats, I believe it is.
All right. And our next matchup, though, I feel like I'm really excited for. And I know we talked about the fact that you're looking ahead to Duke playing against Texas Tech. But maybe before then, there'll be one last hurrah between Coach K and Michigan State. We know that's always been a thing, right? Tom Izzo, H to the Izzo. They're making their 24th straight tournament appearance. I think that's what it is. But as a 7 seed, they're going against Davidson here. And you look at Davidson coming in as underdogs. It's basically a pick 'em, but 1.5 to Michigan State here. Are you down to lay the 1.5 of Michigan State, or are you rolling with your boy Foster Lawyer here in Davidson?
Well, yeah, it's the Foster Lawyer Bowl at this point too, right? That's the big one here. That's a great call. Former Michigan State's Foster Lawyer out here almost blew their chances, honestly, for the tournament. I thought they were more of a bubble team than maybe they actually were here. Okay. I have this is another one that I have a pick 'em, man. Like, again, I just like a lot of these 8, 9, 7, 10s are literally just teams that are right next to each other in our ratings. And so we're getting a little bit of value with Davidson, but this is one where, okay, like I'm going to have to go and sit down and like crunch the matchup here, because getting a 1.5 of value, especially around pick 'em, like it's one thing if it was 7.5 and I had it like 6, 6.5. And we're just kind of waiting on like a free throw late in the game, and that might be the difference. Like it might end up being a possession difference. When it's down in the pick'em zone, if you will, where it's a tie game and you can lose on a shot, then it doesn't really matter that much, right? Like what are the odds necessarily that, you know, Michigan State's going to win by exactly a point? Michigan State is a team that they have a lot of good players. When I watch them, it seems like it's taken longer for Michigan State to figure out what roles everybody should be in. And I mentioned Texas A&M not making the tournament, and my sort of bitterness about that is that, like, it's basketball, you know this, like that's a sport that you should be allowed to improve, right? You should be allotted room for improvement. So if you're not a very good team at the start of the year, but you are a very good team at the end of the year, like that Texas A&M team could play with, I mean, literally showed that they could play with just about anybody. Michigan State hasn't gelled that way yet. And it's sort of like, what are you waiting for here? Because they have a lot of talented pieces on that team. Walker, the point guard from Northeastern, like they just sort of figured out that that's a guy who can make shots late in a close game. And it's like, well, what took you so long, man? Like you recruited him for a reason. You know, what are we doing? And so if they can put it together, like that would be an interesting game against Duke, right? Like you can't tell me Michigan State is that much different in theory, or at least from a talent standpoint, than like Virginia Tech, right? And it's like Virginia Tech just pretty much comfortably beat Duke. Duke's defense is not that good. And so like I'm looking at this going like, man, I really want to sort of buy in on this Michigan State team, but like they're going to have to put it together here pretty quick. And they ended up covering. I was on Michigan State yesterday, so I was glad that they sort of backdoor covered Purdue. But I was a little disappointed that they didn't do better against Purdue in that game. And yeah, I mean, it's relatively close there for much of it, but like Purdue is a lot like Duke in that they are a lot about offense and not that much about defense. And so, I mean, that's going to be a fascinating matchup. But when I'm going to build my bracket out, it's going to be hard for me to just go sort of, you know, to the wall, if you will, with Michigan State beating Duke, you know, like Izzo obviously doesn't have a ton of success against Coach K, right? Like finally beat him in that regional final a couple of years ago. Interesting little corner there, but like that Davidson team is a legitimate problem. They are a legitimate problem for Michigan State. They are probably better coached at this point with Bob McKillop than Izzo right now with the Spartans.
I think I got to roll with Foster, man. I think I got to roll with Foster. That's just where I'm at. But
I'll have a better. I'd like to think I will have a better understanding come Wednesday of where I'm going with that game.
Okay. Well, we can. I'll check in with you then. I'll check in with you then for sure. We mentioned the next matchup. It's obviously number 2 seed Duke. And first off, we know Duke obviously against Cal State Fullerton, they're going to be favored by a lot. It's at 17 points right now. But what I really want to talk about here, and you alluded to this on our last pod for sure, about Duke being kind of gifted, maybe an extra spot, maybe an extra seed here in the tournament. Do you think that they deserve this 2 seed here? Or no?
Yeah, I'm content.
I'll start here.
Yeah, I'm content with this seeding. I was actually, it's weird. I had this feeling, but you know, you and I talked about the idea of Coach K trying to request a spot in the Midwest, right? Because this is exactly what he was trying to avoid. Because you can see what happened in the Midwest, and we'll get to like what happened in the Midwest from a bracket standpoint. And that's the thing I'm kind of surprised by, where they're like, no, sorry, Duke, you're going to the West. You have to deal with Gonzaga in that region. That's an incredibly surprising move from a committee that has basically spent the last 20 years doing whatever Duke wanted, or sort of appeasing Duke at every possible turn here. And so whether it's Izzo in the second round, whether it's a really tough Texas Tech team in the Sweet 16, and of course Gonzaga in the Elite Eight, like I'll end up kind of doing the math probably on Duke and what their road actually is from like a rollover money line parlay type of thing. It's going to be an astronomical number because of some of the teams that are in their way, which I think is really, really interesting. So no, they didn't get that easy sort of route here. As for Cal State Fullerton in this first matchup, it's a number I have at 13.5, and this thing's up to 18 I'm seeing right now.
Ooh.
Like this thing's on the move, and that's the fun part about doing this show right now. Is like numbers are flying left, right, and center, right? Whether you hit reset, reset and like, or go to a different book and like the number's completely different. Like this is really fun doing this live just to watch these things populate. Now some totals are populating and everything. It's this is fun, man. But Cal State Fullerton up to 18. I can imagine this thing, if it continues to go higher, is something that I would be interested in, right? And this is a team in Duke where I don't know that at the end of a game they're going to like play that hard defensively. And I think Cal State Fullerton will be able to get some late baskets. This could be a 25-point game with 3 minutes to go that ends up, 17, 16, something along those lines. So we're going to try to get as many points here as possible over the next 3 days. But Cal State Fullerton will be an interesting play here, I think, as a massive underdog. And nowhere near the money line or anything like that. This is not a Mercer situation, I don't think. I didn't even really like Cal State Fullerton all that much in the Big West, to be completely honest with you. That was a surprise to me that they won that tournament, even last night's game against Long Beach. So this isn't like me loving Fullerton by any means, but this is just sort of like a chance for a Fullerton maybe score a little bit more than I think people are going to think they're going to be able to.
Okay. Well, let's head to the South region next. And this might be my favorite region just because I feel like there's opportunity for a lot of chaos here, but also because Arizona, I think, obviously I haven't filled out the full bracket yet, but I think I'm going with Arizona to win it all. Now, with that said, Arizona's first matchup happens to be one of the first four, which is Bryant, who, let's just get to it. Because I know that you have a lot of takes on this because I just know you, and I know that you will have a lot of takes on this, but you also know how I roll come tournament time. And I like looking for gunners come tournament time that have the opportunity, that want that smoke, that might come out and just say, get on my back. And even if we go down, I'm dropping a 30-piece. When I look at the Bryant Bulldogs, got your man's Peter Kiss, who was the leading scorer in the NCAA at 25 a night. Yeah. That's just, you can't fake that. I'll say you can't fake that, right? That's just getting busy.
Tell you, you can
2-point dogs in that play-in.
I'm surprised by that because I think there's going to be interest in Bryant, and this is a game that I have Wright State favored by 1.5, but I thought like people weren't, and again, who knows, by the time Tuesday tips, maybe Bryant is the favorite because of Peter Kiss. I tweeted earlier this week about workshopping what is the best word to describe Peter Kiss on the basketball court.
Okay.
And I've come up with it. Jabroni.
Hold on. Could I ask you, what about your boy on Gonzaga last year? Because remember, I wasn't not about Drew Timme at all. And
if you didn't care for the Drew Timme experience and his general caressing of the mustache, you are going to be infuriated by Peter Kiss. This is a gentleman who is doing push-ups on the court in the middle of the game, in the championship game. Like, I get it, man. Like, you're winning, and like you can talk about the crowd and the chaos that ensued from there. I watched an interview today with the coach, and he's gone full on, like, what is it, an ostrich that sticks his head in the sand? He's gone full head in the sand on that whole situation. It's like, you're the coach of the team, man. Like, you should probably know what happened at your basketball game earlier on this week that like went nationwide. Like, this is why people now know who Bryant is. Mm-hmm. So from a betting standpoint, okay, this game's gonna be a pick'em game. Like, do you just go with this guy because he is the, again, top scorer in the country? If you bet against him, it is going to be miserable. It is going to be a miserable experience as he's flexing, as he's doing this full-on like wrestling heel. You mentioned like fake, whatever. Like, as he's just faking his way through this game, like doing Hulk Hogan like ear stuff. Like, it's going to be the worst. So in theory, I would like Wright State in this, but like, I don't know if I can emotionally take that, because like, I'm probably going to kick my TV in while I'm watching this clown run around. There you go. Another word for it. Clown. There's also many other words, but I'm trying to clean it up for the pod. So, I mean, this is a real personality thing. And maybe 20 years ago, I would love what this guy is bringing to the table. Because, like, even 10 years ago or so, like, I liked Marshall Henderson. Marshall Henderson was fun. He wasn't a jabroni. He was just kind of a, it was just sort of silly. Like, this guy is just the worst. And so this is going to be more of an emotional thing for you. What kind of a person are you? If you're 18 years old, you are probably wanting Bryant to win this game. I kind of want Bryant to win this game so that they can then play Arizona and we can see that guy get his smug face wiped clean by Arizona. That's absolutely what I'm here for. And that's why, I mean, listen, the NEC is this isn't the first time they've been in a first four matchup. All right. So this isn't out of the realm of possibility. But like, as soon as I saw this guy, I'm like, this guy is going to be in the first four, right? You got to juice these 16-16 matchups somehow, because some of them are pretty rough. Like, there's no coincidence that it's a Texas on Texas matchup in this other first four game. And there's no coincidence that Bryant is here and Peter Criss is here to sort of showcase this absolute jabroni come, what is this game? Tuesday? No, this is
here's
perfect.
Here's my thing, right? Obviously, gambling is one reason why I'll be into the play-in tournament. It's getting me into March Madness. Obviously, the weekend that we have of just straight action. But what other better way would there be for us to get into this tournament than watching my guy just like make a mockery of it all, right? Like, I'm here for the chaos at a certain point.
Yeah.
And my rule for all of these things, and this is, all levels of sport, all different sports. If you put in work, you can do whatever you want. That's my rule. So,
listen,
hey.
I'm right there with you, man. And honestly, like, I like hating this guy. Like, that's the fun of it. Like, that's sports hate. Like, this is the fun part. And of course, it's theater. This is a TV show above all else. It's why I'm already angry about the Texas Tech Duke game that hasn't even happened yet. Like, this is what sort of gets us excited about it. I'm just saying, like, from a betting standpoint, like, do you want to bet against this guy, even if it's the proper thing to do? Or do you bet on him and you just sort of soak in cheering for, fill in the blank wrestling heel, right? Like, that's what he is at this point. And the coach is just as bad, like, absolutely unapologetic. Anyway, we've talked way too much 16 on 16 matchup.
For sure. It's true. It's true.
For a team that's going to get dropped by Arizona, thankfully.
I mean, yes, you're totally right. So let's move on to the 8-9 matchup. And Seton Hall, who, I mean, I'm not really up on Seton Hall, to be honest. I think even though they went on a little bit of a run here at the end in the Big East, still not really a fan. But they get an 8-9 matchup against TCU. And if you look at that point spread, it's basically a pick 'em. Seton Hall getting a point or laying the point here. I don't know. I'm down on Seton Hall, so that forces me to lean TCU, but I'm still going to take a couple days and let that settle in. But what's your take here on this 8-9 matchup, which I feel like all of the 8-9 matchups are kind of just chaos ready?
Yeah, and like, that's exactly it. And this is another one that I have lined as a pick 'em, but I'm here to tell you I don't need any days. I don't need any days. I'm ready. I'm ready to fire.
Okay.
This is TCU. This is TCU +1 every which way but loose. Like, this is TCU +1. This is Jamie Dixon over Willard. Like, this is a Seton Hall team that like had a good stretch in the Big East, but like, they aren't Villanova. They're not Yukon. They're not like, this was, not even positive I'm ready to say they were a top half of the Big East team, really, in this season. Whereas TCU just played Kansas 3 times in a week, right? Like, or like a little bit more than a week. Like, they are tested at the very least, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they lost them all, but like, they at least are tested. And like, now they're gonna play a Seton Hall team that is just like worse at basically every position than there. And like, TCU, again, I was all over the money line against Texas. Like, that was sort of a similar type thing, right? Where it's like, okay, there's a lot of talent on Texas. There's a lot of talent on Seton Hall. But like, okay, do something with it, right? Like we'll get to Texas and like the sort of that big question for this tournament is, are they going to put it together? And you know me, whether we're talking NBA or college basketball, it's like, I'd rather not wait for you to put it together. I'm going to fade you in basketball, a very sort of relationship sport, right? A sort of chemistry type of a sport. I'm not going to wait around for that. And so, like Seton Hall's capable. They've certainly pulled off. I feel like they're in the 8-9 game every single tournament. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. Like it's all who knows what's going to happen.
So true.
But TCU is this team. Like again, that win against Texas meant something. The fact that they gave Kansas all that they could handle, at least in those first 2 games, like that means something. Just playing in the Big 12 for me means something. I wasn't enthralled by the Big East tournament this week. Like that championship game on Saturday was like low-key kind of a bummer between Creighton and Villanova, as like neither team wanted to win that game. All one team had to do was actually shoot a ball into a basket at some point. That game was 19-18 in the first half. Now I realize that's 2 completely different teams here, but like I'm really skeptical about how good the Big East actually was this year. And so we're not talking about facing a WAC team, in the same way that we just did. We're talking about a Big 12 team in TCU that got better throughout the season, right? We just talked about the idea of improving. TCU was not on my radar for the tournament necessarily back in January. They forced their way onto that radar and comfortably into the tournament. They gained a lot of people respect. They'll have the best player on the court. They might have the best 2 players on the court, and they certainly have the best coach. Give me TCU +1 here. I'm hopping on that as soon as humanly possible.
All right, and let's move on to our favorite, the 5-12 matchup, or I shouldn't say our favorite, the public's favorite, right? 5-12 matchup. You got Houston and Calvin Sampson taking on UAB. UAB back in the tournament for first time since 2015. I mean, I know it's a cliche. I'm going to be on UAB, but I'm really going to be on UAB because I feel like Houston, if they didn't get that win, like their latest win, they're not a 5 seed, are they? And they're favored now by 8.5 points. That seems like too many points to me, no?
So what you're telling me here is that you are, in fact, ready for this jelly. Because our guy Phil Walker for UAB, he's ready for the tournament. That guy's ready for the tournament. 3 seed in Conference USA. They end up winning the tournament. Here's the problem. That's a guy. He's the opposite of Peter Kiss, right? He's a guy I want to see play basketball in an unruly way. Like, get your shots up, my guy. Had a phenomenal post-game interview yesterday after they won the tournament about just, everybody, their opponents better be ready. Here's the thing with Houston Cougars. This is the born ready all-star team right here. This team is ready for whatever you want. Do you want to play this game wherever they're playing this game? I don't have that memorized just yet. Or do you want to play this game in a back alley? Where do you want this game? I feel like the committee, for whatever reason, was like, they are not ready for this jelly. They are sending jelly to the wolves here, and that's the Houston Cougars. So I'm sort of with you. Like, I have this number 7.5. It's 8.5. So conceptually, that would be a bet. But like,
this game is in Pittsburgh,
Pennsylvania. There you go. Okay, so no advantage for anyone whatsoever. And like, I love Pittsburgh, but maybe it is going to be played in an alley. This is just going to be one dude after another that like Jelly's going to have to deal with. And it's just a bad matchup, man. It's like they have something against the guy, and they're like, what's the one team that we can sort of deploy here to, even if he somehow got 3 guys in foul trouble, it's like, oh, sorry, we've got an assembly line of dudes here who are like genetically built to stop, wing type players, right? Outside speed type guys with like a combination of like length and athleticism and all of that sort of thing. And so I just look at this and I go, you just go to our guy Ken Palm, the 4th ranked team in the country here at an adjusted efficiency of 26.5, right in between Kentucky and Baylor. And enough time has passed since they lost their 2 guards, like 2 of their best players. Like, that storyline is over. Right? Like, and it's the American, and like, no, maybe it's because they don't get enough attention the way Gonzaga does at the top. right? If they were not ranked number 1, we would say the same stuff about Houston and not playing in a good conference, because certainly Memphis is not better than St. Mary's, for example, or even necessarily San Francisco. But we just sort of go, well, the American has had teams in the past. Well, one of those was Yukon. That team left for the Big East. So that's, old news, if you will. So I get the whole, like, Houston hasn't played anybody, blah, 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 blah. But, like, 4th, and you're giving them a 5 seed? Like, you didn't,
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like they did this meeting a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and they were just like, yeah, we're good with that. Like, what else do we need? We don't have to actually make any adjustments to our rankings or anything. Like, there's nothing Houston's done to deserve a 5 seed. I'm not saying they should be a 1, which would where they, a top 4 team would be. I'm not even saying they should be a 2.
Yeah.
3, maybe a 4.
Okay.
And so the problem here is now UAB is playing in a 12-5 game, which you mentioned, like everybody's favorite. I love a good 12-5 game. Makes me feel young again. I remember the old days when a 12-5 upset was like a real live upset. And this is actually a throwback game, because we'll see some of these others that aren't really upsets in the 12-5 game. This one would be. Because Houston, all Houston does all season is blow out teams that are not as good as them. I don't think they're going to beat a team as good as them, or, in theoretically slightly worse. But all they do is blow teams out. And I think they do it again. It's not fun, because Jelly's my guy, man. I love that dude.
So this is one of those things where Vegas is telling us, no, this 8.5 points is real, and I just saw it somewhere else at 9. So I'm on to you. I'm seeing where you're going here.
Incredibly good point, man. And that's why you have to watch these as soon as they open. You don't have to bet them necessarily, but you have to watch them as soon as they open to see what the first move is. Because the people who are really into this stuff are making the bets right this second, right? And if the fact that this is moving up, or it was already opened a little higher than it should be, because we're pretty bang on with a lot of these projections, a lot of these point spreads. Like, that's what I do. And so the fact that Houston's getting more credit and is potentially getting bet up here, you're right, man. Like, that means a lot.
So, one of the things here that happens come tournament time, you'll have these kind of not one-man shows, but a team that is offensively reliant on one person, and then you just run into a wall of defensive stoppers, right? I like to call those, to quote a wise man named Sean Carter, more professionally known as Jay-Z, we don't believe you need more people. That could be the situation where your man's is in right now. But I have the question for you as we move on to our next matchup involving Illinois and your man's Kofi Coburn. Could he be walking into that same situation? Because only player in the country to put up 20 and 10, right? But now you're going against Chattanooga. And my question to you, right, as I look at this line here, and Chattanooga, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are going to be in on Chattanooga here, but Illinois is favored by 7.5. What's your thoughts here on this?
Yeah. Matchup? So I struggle with this game a ton. So here's where I'm at, right? Had an emotional roller coaster last year with Illinois. Had them 110-1 in the summer before the season started. They get a 1 seed. It's the greatest bet I'll ever make in my life. They don't make it out of the first round, right, against Loyola Chicago. Devastated, right?
Yeah.
I watched them this year. Obviously, Ayo Dosunmu is gone. It just never has fit. This is just I don't like this team. And I like the team last year, and there's some parts or whatever. I just don't like this team. Yeah. So, that's one compartment in this matchup. The other compartment is the Chattanooga compartment. And as January and February start heating up and people start going like, who are the teams that are going to be the upset makers, and there's going to be a problem for this team and that team, like Chattanooga. I'm literally doing it like a Chattanooga choo-choo train right there. I watched this game on Saturday. I watched their semifinal game, and then I watched the game on would have been Monday, I guess, against Furman, and the devastating buzzer beater that we talked. And maybe this is latent bitterness towards that buzzer beater, but I'm watching that game in regulation before we ever got to the point of just massive heartbreak and disappointment. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't care which team wins this game. I hate both of these teams. Both these teams stink. And again, like, one game and a half for each of them that I had seen, right? I watched the semifinals on Sunday and the final on Monday. So as everybody's sort of piling in, like you saw Seth Davis today, and he's like, Chattanooga, you heard it here first. Chattanooga is going to make it to the Sweet 16. And man, maybe he ends up being right. because I don't even really like Illinois all that much, right? So I guess my point is like I was all ready to take whoever Illinois was going to face in the 4-13 type of realm, and I was going to pick the upset in that game. And I was all ready to fade the Mocs in the first round because everybody's all gassed up about Mocs. But they're facing Illinois. And so now I don't like either of these options, right? And I'm sitting here, I can understand, like I will readily admit to you, my numbers make this 5. So there's value on Chattanooga plus 7.5, right?
Okay.
Like I will probably end up making that bet. I'm going to be in a like personal battle about what to do with this in the bracket. I mean, I guess it won't be that bad because I will probably just have Houston advancing against either team. So, like, that's the at least somewhat comforting thing here. But, man, I don't like either one of these teams. And, like, people are going to tell you Chattanooga is going to go a long way here. I'm just not going to be one of them.
Okay. Well, if we keep it moving to the other portion of said bracket, you got Colorado State at number 6 against Michigan. And there's so much talk about Michigan. I mean, they were supposedly a bubble team, and instead of being a bubble team or one of the first 4 teams, they're actually an 11 seed. How did that happen? First off, let's start there before we even get to what the line is in that game. Do you agree with the seeding of Michigan being an 11th seed and not even being in the play-in at all?
We were like 3 more games away from Michigan not being a 500 team. Or whatever their record ended up being, right? Like it was just a matter of time here. They're 2.5-point favorites here against Colorado State. I have this game basically a dead even pick'em here. I am not afraid of Hunter Dickinson here. Like Colorado State can handle whatever Michigan's going to do. Honestly, I think Michigan's a better team when Juwan Howard is not the coach. Because they have a like borderline Hall of Fame. He might be in. I don't think he's in the Hall of Fame, but like a borderline Hall of Fame guy sitting next to Juwan Howard. I don't know if the message doesn't necessarily get through, when Juwan Howard is out there. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Mountain West is like ready for some like vigilante moves here. With we've talked about Boise State being a potential bet with Memphis. Like I'm still on the fence about that one. San Diego State's obviously relatively dangerous in general. That being said, man, like every time or almost every time, unless they were in Ann Arbor in like a really good sort of schedule spot. I mean, the game at Ohio State was pretty good, but like it just seems like failure is at every turn here potentially for this Michigan team. Like it never got to anywhere close to where it was last year. And so, like, can David Roddy take down Hunter Dickinson, Michigan in the round of 16? Yes. Yes, he can. Yes, they can. Yes. I'm going to see how high this goes. I would love +3. We watched Michigan take money on Saturday, on Friday. All the days blend together.
The days are a blur.
Days are just a concept. Against Indiana, right? It was like, it's funny because I wrote about the idea of like I'm wanting to fade Illinois. In whatever the quarterfinals, I guess it would have been, and it's like, but I'm not positive they even get there because I'm not sure they beat Indiana. And then I watched the line go to 3.5 for Michigan. I'm like, what? Like what? And then of course they get to a big lead, and I'm like, well, somebody knew something. And then you know what I knew? The Michigan stinks, and Indiana ends up taking that game. And a massive comeback, and like Michigan, once it went off the rails, couldn't get it back on the rails. And so I think Colorado State, well coached against not particularly well coached, and a pretty decent matchup from a physicality standpoint from a conference in the Mountain West that was its own private war zone all season long. So this isn't a team that just beat the brakes off of everyone. That a lot of times the Mountain West is maybe kind of 2 teams at the top and not much else.
Yeah.
That league was 5, 6, even 7. Man, you can maybe make a case for 8 teams in that league this year being really good. So there were no days off. The travel was brutal. All of that sort of stuff. This team's tested, man. This team is tested, and they're going to beat Michigan, I think, in the first round.
All right. I'm interested to hear your breakdown on this because I know that one of our things we talk about year in, year out is coaching, and they're the coaches that are just kind of the roll out the ball and play type coaches.
Here we go.
one of my favorite coaches to bet on, or maybe more so against, come tournament time. Your man's Ricky Barnes. They get a 3 seed, which a lot of people are kind of up in arms about why is Tennessee only getting a 3 seed after their great performance in the SEC tournament. But they are now, we'll get there. But within that, let's mention 16.5-point favorites in their first round matchup against Longwood. But Ricky Barnes, is it time to fade? I mean, the key's already up there. Is it time to fade Ricky Barnes here? Or were they disrespected in only getting the 3 seed? What's your take on this Tennessee squad?
I'm smiling because this is our guy, right?
Oh yeah.
Give him the nickname, man. Say the nickname. You've been calling him this for 7, 8, 10 years.
Roll it out. Just roll it out.
Roll it out, Rick. Roll it out, Rick. Absolutely. Here's the thing. Roll it out, Rick is a fascinating character in all of this, right? A lot of times his teams sort of underperform throughout the season. And thus, he ends up in a 5-12 type of matchup. And then he gets the 12 team that is pretty good, or even the 13 that's pretty good. This year, okay, first of all, why did they only get a 3 seed despite winning the SEC tournament? Because apparently the committee doesn't get ESPN. And they didn't see anything. They didn't see, or at least the SEC network. I don't know. Like for whatever reason, Texas A&M doesn't get in, and Tennessee gets absolutely, basically next to no credit when it comes to them winning that actual tournament, right? Like, what has Auburn done in the last month? Like they were just penned in as a 2 seed like 3 weeks ago, and we just didn't change it. Like, why couldn't that be Tennessee, right? So, okay, fine. They go and they're a 3 seed. They're going up against Longwood. Longwood really just one of the more fortunate teams in the entire country. So this isn't a team that's going to be able to compete with Tennessee. Now we're talking about a pretty big number here. My numbers come out to 14 for this game. It's 16.5. You'll see something of a trend here, right? Where my numbers are coming out at 14s and 16s when the games are 16s and 18s, right? Like you can see the favorite is kind of getting an extra bucket here by and large, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, maybe that's because of what we saw from Tennessee today. Like, okay, like I can kind of dig that, right? Maybe the idea that people aren't get on board with Longwood. Maybe people are aware, I don't know that many people are aware that Longwood is particularly lucky the way that they are, but, you know, okay, fine. So they end up dominating their conference tournament. Congratulations to them here. This is certainly not a great matchup for Longwood. And there's not many teams in that, 14, 15 line that we're going to be having a particularly great time with a deep, long, athletic, 2 really good point guards, right? Like anybody gets in foul trouble on Tennessee, it's not that big of a deal, right? Like there's always kind of a guy just waiting there to come on in, right? I saw, Fulkerson's out there crying after the game. Like I kind of forgot Fulkerson was on the team. And that's a guy who's played like he's a 17th year senior. And I'm like, oh yeah, Fulkerson. Cause like you look and there's dangerous guys around there, right? Like, James out there, he's shooting threes whenever he wants. And like, again, Rick Barnes always has 2 like just electric, small, dangerous point guards. And then obviously there's some, tons of big men and that sort of thing. And Vescovi's a problem and all of those sorts of things here. So, I mean, Tennessee, like I'm looking at the bracket here. It's like Colorado State, Michigan, Longwood in that court. Okay, like Tennessee's going to make the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Roll it out, Rick is going to make the Sweet 16. And then it's going to get interesting. Like what ways can you blow this, right? Because I was a big fan of that Admiral Schofield team from a couple of years ago, right? Like those were my guys, right? I saw them play live at Rupp Arena that year. That was really fun. And then you go down, you're like, okay, the next group is Ohio State, Chicago, Villanova, Delaware, obviously. It's like, kind of like them against any one of those teams.
Yeah.
So you go, wow, Tennessee to the regional final?
What?
Like, yeah, like roll it out. Rick is going to roll it to the regional final. Like, I'm going to have to take 3 days to come to terms with that as a concept, right? So again, I'm not dying to, I'll put it this way. I kind of would rather Tennessee minus 16.5 in that kind of game, knowing that they can just roll out a bunch of dudes and just win a game by 30 points against a team that's going to be overmatched in Longwood. I kind of like that more than I do like backing him as a short favorite or a short underdog, et cetera, right? Like I cashed Tennessee's SEC plus 100 today, but like I can't tell you I definitely would have bet the +2 yesterday against Kentucky if I didn't have that futures ticket. Like that futures ticket made me, stay with Tennessee. Like I was like, well, +2, like let's not get crazy here. Like that's the fear I have with Rick Barnes, right? Which you obviously all know all too well from our mocking him over the years here. But
that matchup against Kentucky was just a thing of beauty. I mean,
yeah.
Ricky Barnes and Coach Cal, I mean, just a coaching clip being put on there for sure.
Right, and I look through this and it's like, okay, Jay Wright, in theory, is the coach here that would be problematic in this group. Mm-hmm. I just don't know. I mean, we can talk Villanova.
If he has the squad.
But, like, I don't know if he's got the squad. Yeah.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, we'll get there. But first, we got to talk about the 7-10 matchup, which is Ohio State against Sister Jean. Or I guess I should say Loyola Chicago. But Loyola Chicago and Sister Jean are actually favored here, -1.
Yeah.
As a 10 seed.
Yeah.
Is this just a public thing here that everyone's jumping on board? Or it's just Ohio State, nah, get out of here?
Yeah, just Ohio State's not very good, if we're being completely honest, right? Like, they're pretty banged up, so there's some question marks about, like, who might play. E.J. Liddell, there's guys on Loyola Chicago that can guard him. Ohio State's the 32 ranked team in Ken Palm. Loyola Chicago's 24th. Loyola Chicago's a better team. Right?
I got you.
They don't have your guy. I forget his name because, again, my brain only has enough room for anything here. But they don't have the big lumbering center from the last few years or whatever. They obviously have a different coach with Porter Moser moving on. I was going to say the black sheep Valentine brother because Denzel was the better player, but Drew Valentine is the coach of Loyola Chicago, youngest coach in college basketball. So you have the youngest coach and you have the oldest woman on the face of the earth. On these on this team. So there's a real dichotomy there. I think he's like 4 times as young, or she's 4 times as old. Whatever. Don't worry about my math on this. Yeah, man. Loyola Chicago all day, every day, -1, -2, like whatever you want here. Loyola Chicago's going to win this game, and then I'm going to be, I'll put it this way: 30-year-old me, which was never mind how many years ago, would be bummed out that people are going to call this an upset, and they're going to be like, the slipper still fits and like all of that sort of thing because a 10-7 matchup. Now, once you get into a Loyola Chicago Villanova game, now we're talking a bit of a spice festival in this one. Again, 2 teams that aren't that far off from a rating standpoint, but it's Villanova here, right? Like that's going to be a basketball game that we're going to circle on the old bracket here as something that is. Could go a long way, right? Because again, who's to say Loyola Chicago could beat Tennessee? Like, doesn't that feel like a team that Tennessee might lose to? Kind of does.
Woo. Spicy. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but you just mentioned Villanova 16-point favorites over Delaware. Just give me you're taking a 6. You would lean 16 points or not?
I'm gonna give you five words. Delaware plus the points. Oops.
Spread.
Sheldon.
Oh, okay. Boom. I like it. Let's move on to the Midwest. Let's get to the Midwest. I like it. Hey, that works. So let's move to the Midwest. And number 1 seed in this region is Kansas. They'll be taking on, and I don't want to mess this up, it's Texas Southern versus Texas A&M Christian. No. What is it? No!
Corpus Christi.
Damn it. I was so close. I was that close. Okay. I mean, luckily I won't have to, I hope I won't have to learn their name for that long, but we'll start there in terms of the play-in. Yeah. And I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about either of these teams, except that there's a lot of letters there in that Texas A&M CC. But anyways, they come in as they're getting 4 or 3.5 points, which is less points than letters in their, tri-code.
Right? A lot of numbers, man. We are counting a lot here in the last 5 minutes.
Texas Southern favored by 3.5. Who you got, man?
Yeah, Corpus Christi is the worst team in the field. That shouldn't come as a surprise. Somebody has to be. They are an underdog in the play-in first 4 game. Like Duh. But they are considerably worse than anybody else in this. They were, gosh, was it a 6 seed or a 4 seed? Something along those lines in their conference tournament. Again, all blends together at this point. But they were decided underdog even to get as far as they got, right? And they were actually surprised there. They also have the worst jerseys in the entire country. Just a weird lot going on with like it's a cityscape. I guess it's I don't know, right? It's the city line, but it's Corpus Christi, which is an island in Texas. Like it's literally the campus. Looks sweet, man. It looks sweet. It's in the Gulf, I think, and like it looks sweet. I want to go. This has Florida Gulf Coast written all over it, not because they're going to actually win any games, because again, they're the worst team in the country, and Texas Southern, I think, is going to absolutely destroy them in this play-in game. Texas Southern is a SWAC powerhouse, which are two things that don't usually get, two words that don't necessarily go together, powerhouse and SWAC. But within the structure of the SWAC, Texas Southern, a team that regularly makes the tournament or at least the conference finals, they did so this year, won every game in their tournament basically really easily, including the championship game. So Texas Southern knows what they're doing. Corpus Christi, I don't know who's designing the uniforms. They're not a very good team here. I expect Texas Southern to win this game comfortably on a night or a weekend, or whatever, Tuesday, Wednesday, where I think every game is going to be really competitive, except this one.
All right, fair enough. I like finding the blowout in the play-in game because we know there will be a blowout. So, hey, I like that. Let's move on to the 8-9 matchup, which, again, proves to be a little chaotic as you got Creighton and San Diego State. San Diego State favored by -2 in this one.
Yeah, and again, it sort of shakes down to me like loving the Mountain West here, but they got a pretty decent draw in a lot of these, right? Like Boise, Memphis, they end up being small underdogs there. Don't really necessarily agree with that being the case. Same thing with Colorado State here. In this case, San Diego State is, what are they, -2 right now?
Yeah.
I have this -3. This is a bet that I'm going to make on San Diego State. I don't like Creighton. Like, I'm impressed, actually, that Creighton got to the Big East championship game because once Ryan Nembhard went out, it didn't look like that was going to go particularly well, right? They get hammered by Providence late in the season. They lose at home in a game that it was like a pick'em game that sort of put them on the bubble potentially, but then they go and they make this run to get to the final. But that's a semifinal game against Marquette. That's Providence, who we'll get to here in a second. That is a spicy team to talk about in this tournament. Again, I just don't really think the Big East is that great. And maybe it'll be egg on my face when like all the teams win in the first round. Again, I think San Diego State is the better team. The line obviously reflects that. And I think when San Diego State is at its best, it can really run a team ragged. And Creighton is not that team that's going to tough it out, if you will, right? This is a team that I think is more capable of getting blown out than most teams are, especially in sort of pick-a-me type of a game. And I think they got to be disappointed. They had a very good chance of beating Villanova on Saturday night. They didn't take that opportunity. Now they end up in this 8-9 game, and basically the only 8-9 game that I don't think is a pick-em. Give me San Diego State -2 here.
All right, so you talked about what games are pick-em. The next game definitely is not a pick-em, but it is one of our 5-12 matchups as you got Iowa and Richmond. Iowa is favored by 9.5 points. That line doesn't seem to be indicative of the 12-5 upset at all. Now, does it?
Yeah, I mean, this is one where it's like, oh yeah, this would be an upset. This would be a definite upset, right? Like, oh, yeah, okay. Like, we're not doing the thing where, like, one team's only favored by 2 points in this game. I'm sorry, just scamming right now. Where did Iowa end up finishing in KenPom? 13th, right? So Iowa is this, like, again, I always like to sort of take some of these teams and then compare them to teams around them, right? And you can do that with like Georgia State, for example, because right next to Georgia State is New Mexico. And it's like, okay, those, New Mexico's a team in the Mountain West, and you can sort of look, okay, how did that team do in the Mountain West, for example? You look at Iowa right now, they're in between Duke and Purdue. Duke 12, Iowa 13, Purdue 14. Iowa's a 5 seed, Duke is a 2 seed, Purdue is a 3 seed. That's why you get the discrepancy. That's why it's 9.5, because this is a 3 seed playing a 12 seed, not a 5 seed playing a 12 seed, right? And by the way, might be a little nice to Richmond here. Now, I'm sort of kicking myself with Richmond. I looked at Richmond over and over and over again for the A10. I've watched Jacob Gilliard play a bunch of times this year, and I was like, that guy is going to be a problem in tournament play. I should back him in the A10 tournament. Problem was, their route to the tournament was extra game, because they were the 6th seed, then VCU, not a party the day after playing a game, and then they had to, again, because of the way everything shook down, they had to play Dayton, not a party by any means, probably the last team out according to the committee. I think that should have been Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M should have been in. And then they had to play Davidson, right? Like, this is a road that this team just went in on 4 straight days. Like, that is really impressive. And every single one of them, just absolute knockdown, drag out, last second, they win by 1, blah, 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 blah type games, right? Tested. But, like, Iowa, man, like, they're cooking. They are zipping that ball around offensively. The defense is never going to be amazing, but they have a deeper team. This isn't the same Iowa team where it's just a lot of shooters and kind of not that much else. Or, you know, you saw obviously.
Did I see that right? Iowa has a 4th-ranked offense in the nation? That's a thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And every bit of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Mega efficient, and, like, bunch of shooters. Arguably the best player nobody knows about in Keegan Murray. And, like, his brother's on the team, like a twin brother, basically. And it's like, you don't know. I can't tell the difference between the two of them. I'm like, so did Chris get that or did Keegan? It's almost always Keegan because they're identical out there on the court, except for that Keegan's awesome. And, like, Chris probably needs another year to be really good. And then they have, like, Bohannon, who's, like, on his 27th consecutive year as an Iowa Hawkeye, and a handful of other guys who can really, really play. And so, again, this is a team that can win big. So 9.5 doesn't scare me all that much. And Richmond gave it everything they had. Played 4 games in 4 days here. So do we know whether this is a Thursday or a Friday game? Because I don't think that's going to change my perception of this game entirely. But if it's a Thursday game, which I think it is
a Thursday game, It is a Thursday
right?
game.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough turnaround for Richmond. Play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in absolute knockdown dragouts. You know, and Iowa had to do the same thing, but, like, pretty easy first game, pretty easy second game. You know, in the semifinal, you know, against Indiana wasn't, you know, obviously dramatic, but, like, they were able to pull themselves together for the game against Purdue. So, yeah, I mean, 2 teams that are going to be, you know, pretty tired, I suppose. But I think Iowa's efficiency is going to make them relatively, you know, an easy victor here. Just a matter of whether I'm dying to lay 9 points. But you look at the total right now, man, it's 151.5. That's probably going to be close to the highest total of any of these games. So, you know, once we talk disparity, right, 10-point win isn't that big when there's 150 points scored.
Yeah, no, I got you. I'm just super excited to get to the next matchup here because it's a 4-13 matchup.
Yes.
Okay? Providence,
the
Friars, and the Jackrabbits. I don't even want to say Providence and South Dakota because it just sounds better. The Friars versus the Jackrabbits, right?
Yeah.
But this spread, and I had to double check it because I'm staring at it a little too hard here.
That's right.
Providence is favored by 2.5 points. And when you dig a little deeper, you realize the Jackrabbits are just on a run. Like, they were undefeated in their conference. They were 30-4 overall. They're on a crazy, crazy run. And I know that people are down on Providence. But then how are you a 4 seed going against a 13 seed and favored by 2.5 points? I need you to explain this to me.
Yeah.
Also,
shouts
to Jack here too, who's cooking it up on the 1s and 2s here as I see Friars and Jackrabbits on the scroll at the bottom, just because that makes it sound way more interesting than Providence against South Dakota. So shouts to the crew in the back. One-man crew, Jack putting in work.
Yeah, the front. Okay. So first and foremost, Providence minus 2.5, depending on where you look. Yeah. Still too high. It's honestly, it's still too high. It's hilarious. My numbers say 1.5. I never see 1.5. And it's like, so this is what we knew going in. This is why, like, this was like, circle it. This is going to be the best. We knew, okay, no one has any regard for Providence because they got all of these wins this season in the Big East by like 2 points each, right?
Okay.
And so that obviously accumulates, and you look at the standings. You and I always talk about the difference between standings and ratings and rankings and all of that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so they get, and like, I think they still did it like a game in hand, but they win the regular season in the Big East, right? So you get all kinds of credit for that, right? You're number 1 seed in the conference tournament, right? You can pretty much get a walkover against one of the bad teams in the Big East, though that game was a little closer than one would sort of expect against Butler. So they get one win in the Big East tournament, right? And then they lose to Creighton in the semifinal. But the Jackrabbits are right there, right behind them in any metric, any rating, et cetera, et cetera. The Jackrabbits shoot the ball at an efficiency that's like historically good. Now, a lot of that is, if you're, creating shots in the old Summit League and you're making them, like, you're going to be able to do stuff. You're going to be able to make those shots and you're going to be able to have said efficiency, right? Now, the problem is you watched that Summit League final against North Dakota State last week, and that game was really close. And so you go, okay, how much of this is sort of fool's gold, right? Are they going to be able to get the open 3-pointers that they are accustomed to in the Summit League that has like maybe one other like okay type of a team? And so as we sort of go on this year by year journey of trying to trust analytics and like what's good and what's real and what's not, this is where it gets questionable, because you go, okay, I get the shooting's good, but like Providence knows that. And they deal with like the Villanovas of the world who are trying to shoot threes all the time too, right? And they're able to at least sort of contest on a regular basis in the Big East. And so we knew that this line was going to be really low. It just depended on who they were going to play. And sure enough, it ends up being South Dakota State, who on a yearly basis, people are trying to get you to bet. Like, in the Mike Daum era, right? Where he was around for like 3 or 4 years. And it's like, oh man, South Dakota State, like Daum, that guy's a problem. This is different because this is a team-wide thing. This isn't just one dude who's like dominating the Summit League. So at least it's sort of an organizational type dominance instead of a singular type of a dominance. But that's all of that stuff is reflected in the line at -2.5. I mean, maybe not at 2.5. It was opened 2. But we knew if everybody knows that Providence is kind of fraudulent, it doesn't really do us any good. Right? Sure. Because everybody knows. In the same way, if everybody knows that Gonzaga is really good, doesn't really do us any good. So we kind of have to do the opposite on Gonzaga, right? Because we know that they're going to be overvalued. Providence, we kind of have to go the opposite on them because they're going to be theoretically undervalued. Now, they're actually not undervalued. They are sort of appropriately valued because the line is 2.5, and it probably could be 2 or even be lower than that. It'd be interesting to see where this line goes. And so the thing I'm going to have to wrestle with is, like, what do I believe from a basketball standpoint? Is Providence going to be able to do the stuff that the Summit League is able to do to stop what South Dakota State does best? My lean right now would be like, yeah, I think. But, like, Ed Cooley never wins games in the tournament. So, like, who am I trusting here to get this done, right? Like, that's the tricky part in this game. So, like, that's the explanation for why this is low, because it's appropriately low. I'm just not really sure what we're supposed to do with it at this point, because it's low and Providence could win a very tight game and win by 3 or 4 points and they could cover, right? Like we're not getting 5.5 with this Jackrabbits team. It sucks, but I wish we were.
Well, that just means we just need the Jackrabbits to win to give us more time, so that we can then bet on the Jackrabbits going forward, right? That's the hope.
Yeah, well, listen, a Jackrabbits Iowa game would be an electric factory.
Oh, I'm in. Okay,
like
cool.
A billion points in that game.
Penciling that in just for the entertainment value. I am
totally
here for all of that. Let's move on, though. We got the 6-seeded LSU, who started 12-0. But then there's a lot going on there. Remember, I bet you they'd love to go back to those times, right? Like everything was good, feeling great. Will Wade's like, yeah. And then, a lot of stuff's going down involving LSU. And yeah, I don't even know where to begin here, but they're going against 11 seed Iowa State, and Cyclones have some pretty big wins this season, right? And that's a big part of what's going on with looking at this game. And I look at it and just think you got two teams trending in opposite directions. And I look at it though, and LSU is still favored by 4 points. I just don't like the chaos that seems to be surrounding LSU, where now you have an interim coach that's in there, and that's just got to be a lot for these kids to be dealing with, regardless of what's going to actually happen legally, we'll say. Well, I'll kind of try to put that aside. But what's your take here on LSU and how they're going to handle this tournament going forward here? They have a pretty tough matchup against Iowa State, no?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So this is funny because I'm watching that game, the quarterfinal game against Arkansas, and Will Wade gets a technical at the end of the first half. And he had been like blowing up before that. And that was their first game of the tournament, right? So obviously it was their first game they had played in almost a week, right? That game was on a Friday. They played previous Saturday. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, this guy's got a short fuse today. Like, he's got a really, really short fuse. That's interesting. Like, obviously there was the investigation thing, but like, he's lived in the middle of an investigation, right? Like, remember, he was suspended from the tournament a couple of years ago. Was that 2019? Like, he was suspended from the tournament, and that was a really good team. It had some dudes on that team, and he couldn't participate. So this is a guy who, like, he's lived under this cloud for years and years and years. And like, finally, I guess, like, maybe it's a quarterfinal loss, or maybe just the evidence at this point is piling up. And by the way, they went and hired Kim Mulkey from Baylor to be the women's coach. And like, who knows what she's up to in those sort of backroom offices, because apparently she's got a few opinions, and good for her, national championship winning coach. But like, you can just go on Twitter and you hear some Kim Mulkey stuff. And so like, who knows what she's doing as far as throwing him under the bus, potentially, all of that kind of fun stuff that goes on. And so they finally go, you know what, that's enough is enough. Like, you got to go. Now, I don't know who they have in mind necessarily, right? Like, Tony Bennett's wife apparently is from Baton Rouge. How crazy would that be? Like, these are the kinds of things that happen in college basketball beyond the tournament. Is all of that a massive distraction? Absolutely. Right? And we're talking about a team in Iowa State that can defend, and they have that guy at the end of the game. Right? They have that dude. LSU doesn't. They have a lot of, obviously, length and these guys they've recruited. And the key to that team is Xavier Pinson and being able to get those guys organized wherever he can. But he's getting injured. Half the games he spent out, like, knee injury and a wrist injury and like all of this type of stuff. And so when he's not in there, it's kind of chaos for LSU. Like, it's kind of messy out there. And so when I look at that team, I'm like, I want to be laying points with that team going up against a team that's going to, again, new coach themselves, play a ton of defense. Like, just really, if you're disjointed, they are going to take advantage of that disjointedness, if you will. And so for me, I mean, you're already seeing the line start to move here. It's open 4.5. It's down to 4 here. This is like, get on the train while you can here and grab the points with Iowa State. I'm not sure you're going to need the points here. This is an Iowa State team that they're going to be on the old round robin money line parlay that we're going to give out on Wednesday. I can promise
Let's go.
That as I knock the camera over.
Let's go. Well, before you knock over the camera, let's switch it up to the 3-14 matchup, as we got Wisconsin taking on Colgate, Patriot League winners. I mean, regular season and tournament winners. They're 19-1 in their last 20 games. But Wisconsin, we know how Wisconsin likes to play. And I'm going to be honest with you, I despise how Wisconsin plays. And every year for the longest time, Wisconsin would be the team that would end up screwing up my bracket because I'd want to fade them. And then when I would fade them, they would make moves and win. And then the one time I bought into them, they lost. Remember, I forget who the guy was on their team, but they were actually good one year. And then I actually took my bias aside, took them, and they lost. Sorry, bad memories. I'm sorry.
That's trying to be positive. Tournament, man. Good memories, mostly bad memories. Like, I love it. It's the best.
But I'm looking here, and Wisconsin's favored by 8 points. That's a lot of points here against Colgate, who's had a pretty good season. How do you like this matchup? Because to me, Wisconsin games in the tournament all come down to matchups. How do they match up against Colgate?
All right, man. You ready? This is your year. This is your year. Go single cameo on this one.
Oh, wow.
Colgate's going to win this basketball game against Wisconsin. This is going to be, listen, there's a lot of upsets. We figured this out, right? The 12-5, the 13-4, and the 13-4. Oh, like they're 2-point underdogs, all of that sort of thing. When we come down to it, like we're looking for 14-3 upsets. We're looking for 15-2. We're not going to get any 15-2, right? Even Auburn, who sort of tripped over themselves, I don't think they're going to lose that game. Kentucky's not going to lose that game. Duke's not going to lose that game. Villanova's not going to lose that game. The 3-seed line here, this is the team that's going down. Wisconsin's the team that's going down. Part of it's going to be that maybe Johnny Davis isn't necessarily right. He certainly did not look that way against Michigan State. He didn't look at his finest. This Colgate team, we just talked about him hour ago now. Gave Tennessee good 10 minutes last year. They hadn't played anybody all season. That was that weird year that they played 4 teams, I think, in the entire season. They just kept playing the same team over and over and over again. Yep. This team's a bit of a wagon, man. Like, they can get it going. And Wisconsin, when it's not going, when the bank shots aren't happening, the funny thing is, we sort of alluded to it earlier, right? Providence, super lucky team in power conference play. Wisconsin, super lucky team in power conference play. You saw that on display when they're banking in shots to beat Purdue at home. A week and a half ago now. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, like, this bracket is way up for grabs here. Kansas, I think, has an absolute walk to the Final Four here, which I'm okay with because I actually have Kansas from before the season started. No big deal. Colgate's going to win this game. Colgate is going to win this. This is going to be that upset that, like, oh, man, that's so surprising. But it's like, it kind of isn't. I mean, it's 3-14 game that opened 8. This thing's down to 7 I'm seeing right now. That's where my numbers make it. So I'm again, we just talked about this again a little while ago. About, like, the numbers do tend to move in my direction. It already has moved in my direction here. This is going to be one. It's going in the round robin money line parlays. This is going to be the juicy one, unless I sort of talk myself into something larger here. But the funny thing is, you look at these point spreads, right? And there's a lot of, like, 14 to 20s. And there's not a lot of, like, 11, 12, 10 pointers, because the ones that would normally be 11, 10, 12, like, we think about all the ones that were 2 points higher than we thought, right? The 16s that I have 14, the 15 that I have 13. There's no 10s that I have 8. There's no 9s that I have 7, really. So you see, like, it's pretty clear in the marketplace that Colgate is dangerous to Wisconsin, that Wisconsin is vulnerable to Colgate. So that's my call this early on. Maybe something bigger pops up here over the course of this week. I'm not going to be, like, scared, I guess you'd say, if Johnny Davis gets this clean bill of health here in the next few days. I like Colgate a ton in this game. I got to get it quick here before it gets below 7 at this point. But yeah, man, this is going to be in the money line parlay. This is going to be advance it in the bracket. And you're right, man. We'll see Wisconsin in the Final Four, and that'll be the thing that we hate for years to come.
Hey, anytime I get to see Wisconsin and their super slow, crappy offense, just slow the game down and get them out of here. I have no time to watch that. That's what I despise the most about college basketball. Get them out of here. So I'm with you. I'm happy to join on that train.
A lot of pivoting in the post. A lot of post pivots in your future.
Yes, definitely. We moved to the 7-10 matchup. We got USC at Miami. And I keep saying at. Like, that's just in my, like.
Right.
Right? USC versus Miami, 7-10 matchup. USC favored by 2. I mean, USC with the school record, 25 regular season wins, 11-0 non-conference schedule. Like, they had a pretty good season here, but this is a pretty tough matchup for them against Miami. Who do you like in this matchup? It's only 2 points.
Tell you right now, man, I was really quick about a TCU Seton Hall game and really quick about some of these other games because I was pretty convinced about the game. I have no idea. I have no idea about this game.
Hey, that's allowed.
I'm going to need some time with this thing, man. I have USC -1. It's USC -2, right? Like, there's no, edge there. There's no wrong team favored type of a deal. I definitely watched the ACC tournament and was like, man, this Miami team kind of dangerous. Problem is, like, UCLA might be like kind of identical-ish to Miami, like in an athleticism type of a way. Only they're bigger, which sucks for Miami, right? So like,
no, totally.
I think there's a real possibility I like USC, and then I start getting weird with USC. And that's going to get us into this next game here.
Yes, which is a 2 seed Auburn, who I'm really confused about Auburn because one of my rules that I love come tournament time is I need guard play. And when I look at Auburn, their guard play is very, very inconsistent, right?
Yes.
And I mean, I just that's where I stand from. I'm not going to go, full way and be like, hey, they should be on upset alert against Jacksonville State. But it's 16.5 points. That's a heavy, heavy point spread. And if I'm worried about your guard play, that's not a side I want to be on to cover that big of a spread.
It's funny, right? Like, their guards are, you're right, inconsistent, but like too good because they end up thinking they can do too much.
I got you. Yeah,
and they, you know what I mean? So like when you're, I don't want to say bad because this isn't fair.
But is there a little bit of rolling it out too with Bruce Pearl too? Like, is that a thing?
A little,
so like kind of they're doing a little too much?
Yeah, I mean, his strength is in recruiting, right? He's going to have better players. He's going to have Jabari Smith on his team, and he'd rather have Jabari Smith on his team than on your team. And
correct.
And then he gets a bunch of really good players, and they, obviously talks Walker Kessler into coming over, and now they have like this big guy in the middle that they, like we talked about, they didn't have a few years ago when they made the run to the Final Four. Like, this isn't like a team that can't go to the Final Four or a coach that can't go to the Final Four. But the problem is like you get these guards and they have this mindset, it's like if they make a three, it's like, great, we got 3 points, but that means like 3 more of those shots are coming down the pipe here. And Jabari Smith is going to be sitting there going like, man, I swear I could score every time if you just gave me the ball in a spot, like pick one of 3 spots that I like each time down the court. And like, let's just hammer these teams and like get out of here, right? But the guards are too good. Like, if they had, again, I don't want to sort of besmirch anybody here, but a couple of those Virginia Tech guards, for example, yesterday, right? Like, Couture like hit all of the 3-pointers, and our guy Storm Murphy, is out there doing Storm Murphy type of things. Between him and Padula, like, if those 2 guys were guards on Auburn, I promise you they're getting Jabari Smith the basketball. I promise that's the case. But because they've got some doing too much guards out there right now, the problem is Jabari Smith gets mad. And he's like, what are we doing? Like, this sucks. I hate playing with these guys. Like, he's never going to say that, but he's literally like, what are you guys doing out here, right? And like, that's not going to cost him against Jacksonville State, who, by the way, are the only ones out here who didn't win their conference tournament. Right? This is not a team riding any sort of emotional high. They stuck their little sticker on their ticket thing, which, by the way, the ticket thing is the best idea anyone's ever had in the NCAA. It's marketing, it's promotions, whatever you got. And I realize that's not a particularly high bar that we're setting there with the NCAA and their decision making and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the ticket thing with the stamp the sticker on there and everybody's holding the thing, I love it. Point is, Jacksonville State was sitting at home because they weren't even in the final of their tournament because they lost to Jacksonville. Strangely enough, not an in-city rival, not even an in-state rival, but that's a story for a different day. And Bellarmine, who, again, speaking of bad decisions on the NCAA's part, is part of a 4-year transition process, and they can't get into the tournament. And so Jacksonville State's sitting at home, sad that they lost yesterday, and are like, oh, we still get to go. Sweet. And so, like, I don't know what to make of that. Like, what do I
so
make of that from, like, a momentum thing coming into a tournament? So, like, listen, you're not going to be surprised here. My number is a bucket lower. I'm at 14 and a half, right? It's fill, like, every single one of these. So, I don't know, man. Like, am I going to
I'm going to be interested. Maybe. Yeah, I know. I'm going to be interested just because I want to watch Auburn. And you know me, I like the Stars. So I want to see how Jabari does, right? Obviously, because I'm an NBA guy. Obviously, he's supposed to be a top pick in the NBA draft. So we want to see how that plays out. But we won't get to see much of that against – or let me rephrase that. We shouldn't get to see that much against Jacksonville State because they should just give them the business and move on to the next round.
Yep.
let's move to the East. We'll close out with the East here, and Baylor, number 1 seed, defending champs, back in action. And I mean, they went through a lot, right? They went through a lot, but still were able to retain a number 1 seed, and they get Norfolk State. Ain't nobody really expecting much from Norfolk State here, but do you like the big lines that we're getting here from Norfolk State against Baylor at 20?
Yeah, at 20 and a half, I'm seeing like I might bet Norfolk State because I'm almost positive I bet Baylor in their first game last year. I don't think the line was 20 and a half. It was like 25 and a half, but it doesn't really matter. Here's the problem. Baylor will get their guys out of that game kind of quick, like 2 minutes to go type. There'll be 2 minutes of like mulleted guys running around out there and things getting mega weird. Like that's just a thing that happened last year. I think they blew a cover by like giving up
I remember that.
Right? It was really grimy. So like if you want to bet this game, like just hang on to your whatever. Norfolk State powerhouse, again, relatively speaking, in the MEAC conference. So again, not some janky team. They probably, I'm not gonna say they deserved a 15 seed necessarily, but they're probably one of the better 16 seeds of this group. So, 20 and a half points, certainly fine by me here. I've got this number closer to, again, I'd be surprised, but I have close to like 17. So, if Baylor's got a 24-point lead with 2 minutes to go, I think things are going to get super weird, man, because like obviously they've had a couple of injury issues, some guys, out for the year, et cetera, et cetera. So one, they're trying to get guys rest, so they'll be more apt to do that than say even a Duke, for example. And two, the backup guys, again, they lost 3 or 4 guys to the NBA last year. Yeah, they replaced them, but like the bench, for example, isn't like Gonzaga where you put the bench out there and 7 through 12 guys probably should be starting on like a really good mid-major team. That's not what's going on over at Baylor just yet because they just don't have the depth because of these departures and some injuries. So yeah, it'll get super weird late. And so if you're backing Baylor here, like just know that it's going to get kind of weird late.
Okay.
If you're even getting that cover, which I mean, there's again no guarantee that they're even up 25 points late.
Yeah. 8-9 matchup, a little spicy again. North Carolina finds himself in this 8-9 matchup against Marquette, and it's probably just because of their loss to Virginia Tech that obviously did not help their standings here at all. But North Carolina is still a 3-point favorite against Marquette, and it took me a second because I always forget about Shaka. Like it just threw me off for a second there because I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot when that. Yeah. But anyways, point remains: North Carolina -3. Do we like that, or are we riding with Shaka here? Because listen, Shaka, he's proven, right? Been able to do it at multiple places now. And 3 points, might like to take those 3 points.
Yeah, I have this at minus, I mean, if we're getting specific, -1.3. So somewhere in between 1 and 1.5. This is just, I don't want to fade North Carolina, but I don't really want to bet on North Carolina either.
I got you.
So yeah, I mean, the answer to that is probably like +3 here with Shaka. It's a good thing that Shaka's on his third team, taking his third team to the tournament. And he's like not even 40 years old yet. That's always a funny one where like he's taking his third team.
Yeah, but
it's like
one of those places is Texas, and Texas we know is a little.
Well, it's like you got fired from Texas, and like you landed in a decent spot, but anyway, a lot of moving around for our guy Shaka at this point. So who knows if that's a good thing. This is one where I'm probably going to talk myself into Marquette on that sort of value concept, and I'll sort of working my way backwards because this is bracket season, right? This isn't just a Saturday in February and like a bunch of games to bet. It's like, okay, we have to put some bracket strategy into play here, and we'll talk about that a ton later on in the week. Obviously, tonight we're just talking first round point spreads and all that stuff, but this is going to be one where it's like, man, a lot of people are going to be on UNC, and if you're trying to steal a point in a bracket contest with an underdog who's very live to win the game, Marquette might be that team, I
like it.
And so it might kind of work that way where I'm like, well, I've already got Marquette to move on in the bracket. I might as well take +3 on the point spread, or for example, plus 128 on the money line.
Hey.
You know what I mean? So like that's how in my mind I can envision sort of seeing that, unless something sort of pops up where it's like, oh no, you have to bet North Carolina because yeah, it looked good against Duke and yeah, it looked good against Virginia, but then it looked the opposite of that against Virginia Tech, and it's like, yeah, that's this era of North Carolina, right? Like fully inconsistent. Where like, yeah, maybe if they had beaten Virginia Tech, we would have seen them in the 7 or even the 6 line. But if they hadn't beaten Duke, right, we were wondering whether they even deserved to be in the tournament with one quad win all season long, and like we were talking play-in game for them because if they don't beat Duke, you know what happens after that. So when it comes to North Carolina, man, like who knows at this point? But Marquette's capable.
So let's keep it moving though as we move to the 5-12 and St. Mary's. We know St. Mary's in Gonzaga's shadow, but they're getting a lot of pub here as being a pretty good team. I'd like to say there's people who are on St. Mary's here, but things get a little more interesting as they have to wait for the first 4 matchup to get their opponents in the first round. And it's Indiana versus Wyoming. Indiana favored by 4. Shouts to Mike Woodson, right? Mike Woodson appearance here. And I'm just like, okay, let's go. Yeah, they're the last 2 teams in, obviously, right? And I feel like Wyoming and Indiana, I don't know which way to lean on this one because I feel like Indiana should be able to cover the 4 points, but at the same time, 4 is just a weird number to me. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Like Wyoming's interesting because they play sort of a very untraditional style, especially in 2022. They put their point guard in the post in a lot of cases. A lot of point guard backing down type situations, right? And then he
doing
distributes. You don't like that. You do not care for that. But you know he makes it work, right? And so they're distributing from that standpoint. And you know, again, they have a couple other really good players here. Wyoming team is a really good team. And Indiana, we just spent the whole season wondering if Indiana should be in the tournament. And like, evidently, if you sort of read the tea leaves, so to speak, with them being one of the last 2 teams getting in the play-in game, they beat Michigan and Illinois. I wonder if they hadn't done one of those 2 or had like either of those, right? If they don't make that comeback against Michigan, who knows, right? This is probably Dayton and Wyoming. And I don't think, is Dayton even allowed to play in a play-in game, considering these games are in Dayton? I don't think that's even allowed. So, like, I don't know the rules on that. But
it's a great point,
right? Like you're not allowed to play at home in any other round. So would they have to force Dayton into, like, the main draw and push somebody else back? Like, these are the questions
I guess so.
that I have that I probably will never get answered.
And they're like, let's just avoid that situation and just make Indiana
kick them out entirely. Get them out of here. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here going like, where's Texas A&M? So like, who knows, man? Because all these teams are just kind of the same, which is like a roundabout way of saying like, what's our old favorite phrase, right? Like, when in doubt, take the points here. If you're going to be 4 points with sort of a really sort of, I'll use a Steph Curryism from the finals a few years back, a real janky group in Wyoming, right? Like, they're just going to run some weird stuff. Is Indiana and Mike Woodson prepared for that? Do they necessarily have the talent? Because Trace Jackson Davis was awesome this past weekend, but like, okay, when is that going to be around consistently? Is that a thing that we've seen over the last 3 years? Like, no, not really. Like, you know, so I guess my point is like, at the end of the day, I'm probably taking the points here, knowing full well that like there's a possibility Indiana wins this and it lands in that zone between Indiana like money line and Wyoming +4, for example. Whereas like the other play-in game, which we talked about, Notre Dame, it's like, no, I'm Notre Dame like all the way, you know, through. This one I'm way less.
I got you. I like it. Let's move to UCLA and Akron. UCLA is favored by 14 points. They're also, you know, finished second in the Pac-12, a pretty good run to end as they won 8 of their last 10 games. They're a 4 seed against Akron, the 13 seed, and that's a lot of points, though. Are you comfortable taking that many points with UCLA and they're showing in the Pac-12?
Yeah, I mean, I like this UCLA team a lot. I will say that. 14 is right around the right number. So it's funny, like when I get a little nervous about all these teams, in the 17, 18 range are kind of 2 points higher than I would make that number. Then I see, okay, the number is pretty much exactly right in this game. What does that mean, right? I don't know that means anything necessarily. It just sort of means, okay, once you get further away from pick'em, i.e. up into the 20s, a point or two doesn't matter as much, right? So this number is accurate. So I don't really, don't have like some big stance on UCLA Akron at this point. I will say this: the argument for Akron, I'm not sure there is one. Right? Like the Akron is the fourth best team in the MAC. Who knows what would have happened if the idiot on what was it, Kent State, doesn't put the video out about how much he hates Akron, and then gets himself 12 points per game suspended for the first half of the game, and lo and behold, guess what happens? Akron's up by double digits at halftime, right? Of course, right? I hopped on the first half money line. I had Akron +3 already. It was a great time for me. Shouts to Akron for cashing those tickets. Problem is, Toledo is the team we thought that were going to be there. Kent State, obviously a team that we thought might be there. I liked Ohio in that tournament. Shout out to Ohio for not getting it done for me in that case. None of those are Akron, right? I don't care for Akron. So this felt like their accomplishment of the season, right? Where like the New Mexico States, the Vermonts, like their goal, okay, we're going to win our conference. Just don't bleep it up. We're going to win that conference. And like the tournament should be the thing that we're going to, and maybe we can do some damage there. Akron, before that MAC conference tournament, I'm not sure they were even considered themselves the possibility that they would be in the NCAAs, right? Like everybody sort of dreams of that, right? But they would have no expectation for doing so. If they show up sort of feeling good about themselves, UCLA is going to blow them out. But they're going to do it sort of 2 points at a time. UCLA, the difference between this year's UCLA and last year's UCLA is size. They have size now. Last year it was like if they had to match up down low, it was like one dude and like that's it. And then they were like, you know what? Let's bring some size in, right? So they bring in the big guy from Rutgers, they get a couple guys healthier, and now you have Juzang. He's out there sometimes playing a 2-guard type position, and it's because everybody else is bigger along the line. Where like last year you'd see Juzang, you'd be like, he's the tallest guy on the court for UCLA at times, right? So like it might just be a 2 points at a time sheer overwhelming of Akron, who frankly just kind of got here a little bit lucky in their conference tournament. I know people are sort of listening to this are going, okay, I don't really know what the difference is between New Mexico State and Akron. A lot of the cases is just look to see what seed they were in their conference, and then you'll be able to figure out what their expectations were this season and like how good they could be, against top competition. Whereas Akron just doesn't measure up here in the MAC, which like basically never does anything anyway in the tournament. I shouldn't say
very
that.
true.
They do some stuff sometimes. Not much though.
No, I'm okay with that statement. I'll back you up on that one. We look at the top part of that bracket, and obviously, you got Seth Davis out here yelling about how he thinks St. Mary's will beat both UCLA and Baylor. Which, hey, cool. I don't know. We'll deep dive further into St. Mary's a little, maybe on our next pod. But we look at the bottom portion of said bracket here. Kentucky looks like they have a pretty good run here in this portion. As we work our way towards that, you got Texas. And what are your thoughts here on Texas? Because I know that they had a very interesting season, but now they get Virginia Tech. And, I'm looking at this matchup and I'm thinking, I struggle with Texas sometimes. Sorry. I struggle with Texas sometimes. Even without Ricky Barnes, I still struggle with Texas because I never know what to make of them. Because maybe I'll always be hurt.
Shaka, it's Beard. Like, well, what are you supposed to make of this? And Beard's the best one of that group, probably, right? Like, in theory.
But how can they never figure it out is more.
Well, that's the thing. So, like, I don't want to paint Chris the burnt orange brush of Chris Beard with the failings of the previous coaches, right? I don't want to do that. I'm just I can only look at this team, because the other thing is, like, Chris Beard takes this job and he's like the Pied Piper, and he's calling in like the best players from around the country, like, hear ye, I'm going to Austin, like, everybody who's averaged 15 points a game, come here. And it's like Marcus Carr's like, I'm coming, Minnesota's cold, and you know what I mean, like Allen's coming, and it's like all these guys are coming over. Bishop, the kid from Creighton, right? It's like everybody's coming over, and then they get there and they're like, still only one basketball for this team. And like, I don't know if that's the issue, or just the pieces aren't working, or the old guard guys aren't really sort of loving what's happening with the new guard guys, or just they just haven't figured out the roles yet. And it's like, you're supposed to do that at some point. And again, I keep referencing Texas A&M, but like, you're allowed to get better. You're allowed to figure this stuff out, and that's what Texas A&M did this season. And Texas didn't. But Texas got so many opportunities for quad one wins because they play in the Big 12, and you get those opportunities. And yeah, they did more than West Virginia or Kansas State, teams that didn't make the tournament. But like, you have so much talent. Like, yeah, you are going to win a few of these games, just kind of by accident in a lot of cases. And so I just look at it and I go like, okay, you know how I feel about this stuff, man? Like, I want to see the team gel first, and then I would like to bet on them. I don't want to just kind of guess that they're going to get this figured out, because I look at Virginia Tech, and that's the cool part about this matchup, is that like their coach does the same kind of deal, and he sort of hear ye it, but it's like dudes, obviously his guys from Wofford and some other sort of mid-major type schools. He gets all these smaller school guys. But he's making them work. He's putting them together. They have improved. We allowed them an opportunity to improve, and they took the opportunity, and they beat Duke. And that's the difference between Virginia Tech. They beat Duke, and Texas A&M didn't beat Tennessee today. And that's why one team got in, one team didn't. I think both teams should have gotten in, because I don't think you should penalize Texas A&M for not getting that win today, because they weren't very good early on in the season. There's a lot of teams that aren't very good at the start of the season, but this tournament isn't even played at the start of the season. But this Texas team is, like, again, capable. If you told me they made the Final Four, I'd be like, honestly, man, probably, sure, cool. Like,
Okay.
I get it. Like, oh, okay.
And fine. I mean, well, here's the other part. You're talking about. You look at the rest of it, and it's Purdue against Yale.
But the route, man, the route is so hard. Virginia Tech is legitimately, like, organized, for lack of a better term. Purdue
no, that's a great term.
Purdue is going to, like, they might not be particularly organized on on defense, but like Texas offense isn't going to be able to take advantage of that. And so like, that's going to be a mess. Like, imagine Texas and Beard and all of these dudes on the bench trying to like say who's going to play against, Zach Edey's coming in and like, okay, so that means Bishop, I think. I don't know. And then like, Williams comes in and it's like, all right, now who should go in for, like, they're a matchup mess for a team that doesn't have kind of a plan, right? Yeah. And so Purdue can outscore that team. So I just go like, why bother with Texas at this point? Like, why bother, buying low, if you will, on Texas? Because I'm not even really sure we are buying low on Texas. Now this line, I've got this Texas -1.5 here. So again, not a massive spread in this game. I'm sort of skimming through here, and they're -1 right now. So like, okay, I'm probably gonna end up on Virginia Tech, man. Like, I'm probably just going to like, and a lot of it, honestly, we'll sort of talk about this stuff later on in the week, and like not getting like drunk on the idea of, oh, they won their conference tournament and they're coming in hot, has like next to no correlation with success in the tournament. But like, we're just talking one game here, right? Yeah. And so part of it is like, I just want to be on a team that's organized versus a team that isn't. Texas seems right now like a low rent Duke, whereas Virginia Tech here is like a high rent. I was going to say high rent St. Mary's. That's not really fair, but like from an athleticism standpoint, like probably a better, like there are a more athletic team than St. Mary's, and like that's pretty good, right? Like let's call them a high rent Wofford, right? From back when Wofford was in the tournament, causing disturbance for a team like Kentucky, which, by the way, might have a rematch with with Virginia Tech.
For sure, for sure.
Wofford.
So, So as we keep things moving here, you got Purdue and Yale. Purdue, the 3-14 matchup. Purdue 16.5-point favorites. But if I'm being honest, I kind of want to jump ahead because I really want to talk about this Murray State San Francisco matchup, the 10-7 matchup. And, a matchup between two teams that, it is kind of weird to see a 7-10 matchup of this branding, we'll say, if I put it that way. But this has the makings of being a great, great matchup, no? And San Francisco's favored by 1, but this is what I love about the tournament because this is going to be a guard play special, no?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Both teams are really good. This is the classic infuriate me type play here for the committee. Two teams that are really good that I would like to take against
someone else. Yes.
Against somebody else. Yeah, man. Like this is like, oh, I'm sorry, Murray, San Francisco, neither of you are a big enough brand. We're going to have to pitch you against each other. And it's obvious. Like there's a reason San Francisco's favored against Murray because San Francisco is a slightly better team. But you can put a team from the West Coast Conference, right? The third best team from the West Coast Conference, anywhere you want on this bracket. Because no one's going to complain about it, right? Gonzaga has to be a 1. St. Mary's has been doing this long enough that they've gotten themselves credit with a 5. That was surprising to me. They seem projected as an 8-9 all the way through this process. Like any sort of Lunardi or bracketology projection had them an 8-9, so they go up to a 5. San Francisco's not that much below St. Mary's, but like you can put them anywhere you want. And so where do they put them? Against Murray State, who's this small school, obviously our guy John Morant, but like they have a ton of talent. You see those guys getting off the bus and you're like, man, we are in for it today. So I like Murray State in this game because I like Murray State as a concept, right? Like and I know that San Francisco is being deployed right now to give Murray State a problem, and also Murray State is being deployed to give San Francisco a problem. And both of those teams are being led out to slaughter against Kentucky in the next round. Like that's
exactly what it is.
Overt attempt to take two teams that could make the Final Four in a variety of different pockets in here and slaughter them before they get to the second week. And it's going to work. That being said, if it doesn't work, it's because Murray State beat Kentucky.
Woo!
Which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, we've seen Coach Cal falter more than one occasion.
And this
with
Kentucky
the roster
team is really good. Like, really, really good. Really good.
Yeah.
But
I got Kentucky making a run here, so I mean, we'll see how things play out.
You can't take Murray State to the Sweet 16 because you can't be remotely positive they're going to win the first game. Even if you wanted to go out on that limb in a bracket contest, you're forced to not be able to. When Murray State Auburn, man, I'm in, right?
For sure.
Yes. But you know what happened on the Auburn corner of the bracket? An ACC team and a Pac-12 team in the 7-10 game. That's not an accident, right?
Yeah.
Like if Auburn goes down in the second round, it's not because some low-budget team that this NCAA doesn't get money from, right? It's because USC or Miami won, and that helps the NCAA. So anyway, that's a little bit of a high horse situation here, but there you go. By the way, Kentucky -14 in my numbers. Spread's going to be higher than that. I think that's probably fair because this is a really brutal matchup for St. Peter's, who's not good at scoring the basketball, really good defensively, bad at scoring the basketball. So there you go. That's the last of it, I think.
It's the last of it. I mean, we went through all the games here, and I mean, if you're a diehard NCAA fan and you're rocking with us tonight, that's 2 hours of breaking down every single first round matchup I don't know, first round, second round, however, we know what we're talking about. But the point is, we hit you with a little bit of info that you need on every single game right after the bracket came out. bracket's still just a couple hours old, but we already got you some picks. We already got you some upsets. We already got you some information, but it doesn't stop there because we will be back on Wednesday with some best bets for the first round, with some strategies for how to win your bracket pool, whole lots more coverage here on the DRF Sports Podcast. But in case people want more information from you, my dude, where can they find you online?
Yeah, man, at MRuss Authentic on Twitter. Everything that I write for The Score goes over there. We're going to have regional previews, all of that fun stuff, bunch of other stuff, but we are going to break it all down on Wednesday here with you. And like you said, man, we're going to have them covered from all angles here. The best we can do right after the selection show is have point spreads for every single game. You know what I mean? Like, that's not bad.
We're giving sides, though. We're also giving some sides and hit you with a little bit of everything.
Oh, yeah.
So, hey, if you're one of those people that are just ready and you're just now tuning into college basketball and want to cram and get your studying in, we got you. You can wake up. If you didn't listen to this right away, right after, hey, I get it. I understand. But we got you for your Monday morning commute back into work. Those of us that are back to doing Monday morning commutes, story for another day. But you get the point. The point is we got you with the content that you need to get your week started off right so you can try to win some money coming up this March Madness tournament. But again, another reminder that DRF Sports has you covered. DRF.com/sports for all the coverage you need this March. We got you here on this DRF Sports Podcast, but also we got you on the DRF College Sports Podcast as well. What more do you need this March? We got you covered. But Matt, thank you for joining me here. Jack, thank you behind the scenes for making this work here, this live stream. We got you covered. And until next time, thank you for tuning into this, the DRF Sports Podcast. My name is Sheldon Alexander. Talk to you soon. See ya.